Let's break some boards, chat. Let's break some boards. And look, I included Marionette Might and Kurikara. I don't know what they're doing in the board breaker tier list. They should be in the hand trap tier list. My bad. Anyways, what is good, YouTube? Welcome to the third tier list in the bunch, the board breaker tier list for the upcoming format. We've already recorded and probably also published at the time of you seeing this, the tier list for the format and a hand trap tier list. So you might want to check those out, and you might want to be subscribed to the channel if you enjoy the content. That would mean a lot to me. Let's hop right in. Why is there a retaliating C? And why is there a contact C? Ignore those. I put these in on accident. I don't know why they are in here. They should have been in the hand trap tier list. Anyways, once again, I'm going off of what I think the format is going to be, because we haven't seen tournaments yet for the format, and you can look at the tier list that I already made for what I think is going to be relevant. So we're going to try and see how do we beat those decks. Duster is a strong but situational card. I think a lot of people are going to want to side deck Duster simply because it's mainly a card that makes you feel good about Labyrinth. The reason why specifically Duster is going to be super popular is it's a great target for Thrust. The category now is tributing your opponent's shit. We've got Santa Claus, Kaijus, Lava Golem, Sphere Mode, Kurikara. Tributing your opponent's shit is a category that's going to be important in the upcoming format. It is relatively situational, but I think in some shape or form necessary because of one particular deck, and that is Purely. Purely is a deck that has a Towers monster in X Purely Noir, which is unaffected by your card effects. So you need some way to out it. You could play Underworld Goddess to clear the towers, but most decks don't have the extra deck space or don't have the luxury of just spamming out a bunch of monsters. So you want some sort of way to out it this way. I will say one popular way, Herald of the Abyss, is one way you could do it if you play Thrust. If you don't have that option, or you think you want more than that, you're going to want to look into some of the tribute stuff. I believe Kurikara is strong. I believe Kaijus are solid, but have actually pretty good coverage. I think Lava Golem is strong, but situational. I think Sphere Mode is only solid and very situational. And I think Santa Claus is bad. Unless you're playing Purely, you could consider Santa Claus. Beauty can turn it to attack, and then you can run over it a bunch of times with Happiness. That's why it's good in Purely. In other decks, it's bad. And I guess XYZ Encore is also a possible way to out towers, right? So the reason why I think Kurikara and Lava Golem are better than the other options mostly are Kurikara is a body on your side of the field, which is worth a lot, right? Against Purely specifically, Kurikara is also pretty much always live because they draw in your standby phase. First action, you can just tribute that shit. Lava Golem is good for a different reason. Lava Golem is actually not that reliable against Purely because sometimes they don't have multiple monsters. I think if you play Lava Golem, you still side it against Purely because they very often have multiple monsters. But Lava Golem is also very good against Unchained. Unchained boards crumble to Lava Golem. No matter what board you make, the Soul of Rage plus Wave King Caesar, Lava Golem that shit. Griffin plus Muckraker, Lava Golem that shit. Lava Golem is very good. The problem with Lava Golem is not every deck can use it, right? A lot of decks need their normal summon. That's why it's situational. But you can play Lava Golem in like Purely, for example, and it works. Kaijus I put into solid but good coverage category because Kaijus are just not as impactful as a Kurikara or a Lava Golem or a Sphere Mode. But the good thing about Kaijus is that they kind of always work, right? They don't stop you from normal summoning. They don't require your opponent to commit multiple monsters. They pretty much work in almost any matchup, honestly. If you have Kaijus in your side deck and you want something else for going second in a specific matchup, you can pretty much always throw in the Kaiju. There's like no deck pretty much where the Kaiju is completely useless. Labyrinth, okay, against Lab, you wouldn't side these. Sphere Mode, I would not recommend you to use actually because it's not good against Unchained. That deck doesn't put 3 monsters on the field most of the time. It's not good against Purely because they don't consistently do that as well. Sphere Mode is only good if you're scared of like the super all-in combo decks, right? It's good against Dragon Link. It's probably good against Vanadium. It's probably good against something like Infernoble. The tier 2 and Rogue stuff you want a Sphere Mode against. And then XYZ Encore, it's only good against Purely, and you might as well play like something else. The only cool thing about this card is that it does work in draw phase, so they don't get the draws from Sleepy Memory. But yeah, as much as I like Alpha Master of Beasts as a card, I love this card. I think it's not that good. Books. Book of Lunar Eclipse is bad. Book of Eclipse and Book of Moon. Let's talk about these. Insanely popular in this current format before the ban list. And for good reason, right? I think there were two reasons. The first reason was it was an out to Arise Heart. And the second reason was there wasn't really any Omni Negates in the format. The Arise Heart issue is gone. That card is now banned, of course, finally. So the biggest reason to play the books is kind of gone. However, I still think that the books are solid cards because there's still not that many Omni Negates running around. There's still some merit in these cards simply because they have solid coverage, right? And that's where I'm going to put them. I don't think they are top tier cards anymore. Like literally before the ban list, I would have put them in the best of the best category, right? I think they get a little bit weaker, but they are still very powerful cards for so many reasons. Like they are still super flexible. They are great interruptions when you go first. They help you out certain things when you go second still, right? You can prevent purely leap from ranking up, which is a super powerful interaction with Book of Moon and Book of Eclipse. You can out the Wave King Caesar from Unchained. You can also just hand trap certain decks instead of booking them. You couldn't really do that with Kashtira. So I think books become worse, but they are still a solid option. Chalice, I don't think is that great. It's not terrible, but it's also not that impactful. Chalice outs Dweller if you're Unchained. That's why I'm putting it in solid and situational, because there are certain decks that might want it. Like if your deck loses to Dweller, for example, and people make Dweller in the upcoming format, that could be a reason to play Chalice, because book doesn't work in that case. Right? Change of Heart is an interesting card because it is solid against Unchained to take their stuff rather than destroying it by card effect. That is not very good against Unchained. I think it's a solid card. I don't think it's as good as some other stuff. Another reason is obviously Anti-Spell. Most Unchained lists have been running Anti-Spell. In general, I think Change of Heart is a very solid card against Unchained, and it's also a solid card in some other matchups. The problem is, for any given matchup, there's probably a better card. Like for example, against Unchained, Marionette Might is just a stronger option of Change of Heart. Change of Heart is still good. So if you're looking for one more card against Unchained and you want to do like a board breaker approach, I think Change of Heart is good. This card's not very good. Raigeki and Dark Hole are, I think, solid cards in this upcoming format. I will say one thing. People kind of write off these cards immediately against Unchained. I don't think these cards are that bad against Unchained, because the Unchained stuff does float. But still, Dark Hole or Raigeki gets a lot of their floater effects out of the way. Plus, it solves the Wave King Caesar as well, right? And I think that's worth something. Especially because you can use these in a lot of other matchups too. Maybe it's more like these cards are solid, not amazing, but they have very good coverage because they work in a lot of matchups. I think that's more like it. Dark Hole has the added bonus of beating Ibli. We have an exciting one coming up that I'm very happy to talk about finally again. Like, Forbidden Droplet was a card that in every single tier list, while Kashtira was a thing, we had to say, oh my god, Droplet could be okay, but a Rise Art completely invalidates the card. Droplet is back. Now, only because a Rise Heart is gone, I don't think Droplet becomes an instant god card. I think it depends a little bit on your deck, and also it depends on the matchup. I think the card is good. I think it's a strong card, but situational, because not every deck can play Droplet, and it's also not good against every deck. Like, for example, I would argue against Purely, the card can be okay, but of course, the Noir is still unaffected from it if they get to it. The best thing about this card, of course, is that it's good going first and second, just like the books. That's always one of the best things about board breakers, is when you can main deck them. If your deck has synergy with Droplet, definitely consider Droplet for this upcoming format. I think it's good. Enemy Controller seems like it's a good card against Unchained, but it is rather situational still. I don't see it being great against Pearly. I don't see it being great against Rescue Ace. I see it being okay against Unchained, but far worse than actually Change of Heart or this thing, right? The only advantage that enemy has is it's better to main deck. But if I really want to main deck a quick play spell, I think I would rather play books or Droplet. Evenly Matched is a card that I'm kind of torn about. Looking at some of the top decks, or what I'm expecting to be some of the top decks, I think the card is only okay. The card is worse against Unchained than people think, because Unchained can just chain the Scrap Dragon trap, pop some of their shit, so it goes to the graveyard, keep the Wave Caesar around, and then Yama triggers to bring back the Link monster, for example. I think one of the good things about this card is that it's kind of useful in almost any matchup. Like, the thing is, out of the top tier decks, Rescue Ace has a problem against Evenly. All the other top tier decks have ways to either play around Evenly or not really care about Evenly. Unchained has insane follow-up, so even if you evenly them and you can play in main phase 2, you still need to be able to deal with their follow-up. The card is good against Lab, but Lab can set up Eradicator if you enter battle phase, so it's iffy. And just the most important part is you can't kill any deck after evenlying them. You're left in main phase 2, and then Unchained, worst case, they still have Wave King Caesar, they still have Griffin up on the board, and you don't have a battle phase. Purely just keeps Noir, and you'll probably lose to that if you don't have another card. So like Evenly is a card that you have to pair with so many other cards for it to have an impact. So actually, I think it goes even down here. I'm not a huge fan of Evenly in theory right now. I don't think it's that great in the upcoming metagame. It's not good enough against the combo decks. The combo decks just have too many negates, and most of the other decks have solid ways against Evenly. Fenrir, as a board breaker slash tech card, of course, it's very, very strong. The question is, does it go up here or does it go up here? I think it might be the first one that we put up here. It doesn't solve boards on its own. It forces interruptions, and it forces interruptions very consistently. It's a really strong card when you go first. I think that's the best thing about Fenrir. Like against every single deck, you go second, Fenrir will force an interruption. And if they don't have a good interruption for it, it can even carry a game on its own. And it's really good going first. There's no matchup where it's bad. So unless you want a card that is like specifically for a certain matchup, or you want more hand traps that you could play over Fenrir, Fenrir is really good. Yeah, it doesn't really have a drawback attached to it, right? Lightning Storm, I think it's like here. I think it's okay if you want more back row removal. It's a really solid card. Against Unchained, it's the same as Darkhold pretty much. If you want to get rid of the Caesar, you can kill the back row against... I like this card. I think it's a solid option. Of course, it's situational because going first, it's completely dead. So I wouldn't recommend you main deck this card, but you can side deck it. There's some cards that it conflicts with, right? Ibli, Phantasme, yada yada, right? So if those are in your deck, then you might want to consider not playing Lightning Storm. But other than that, it's a solid card. Mind Control is like a strictly verse version of Change of Heart. I don't know if I really like Mind Control right now that much, but it's not a terrible card. I think I would rather play Hand Traps than Mind Control though. Pankratops I'm a fan of in this format because it's pretty solid against a lot of decks going second. I wish we had 3 Pankratops because it would be such a consistent way to out Floodgates. Anti-Spell in general is going to be, I think, a popular card. Not everywhere, but it's going to be there, right? And having the failsafe against it, I think, is really good. And the card just seems solid against a lot of decks. Like, you build your side deck, you have like one last slot open. You're like, yeah, let's put that Pankratops in there. I think that looks very solid. Super Polymerization. It's definitely a card to be respected. Like, it's never a bad card. I'm just not sure it hits the right decks at the right moment in this format. If you go first against Unchained, you can probably disrupt them at some point, but the board going second is not weak to it. Pearly is kind of the same thing. I think Super Poly is actually one of the weakest it's ever been since Garura came out. Dark Ruler No More, on the other hand, I think is okay. I don't think I would main deck it either, but the reason I like it is because it just covers a lot of matchups in the side deck. It's good against dragons. It's not great against Unchained, but you can side it. Like decks that really struggle against the Wave King Caesar or the Griffin, you can put Dark Ruler in. Even if you just deal with the Wave King Caesar, it could still be okay. And it covers stuff like random shit like Infernoble. Against Mannadium, they have the counter trap, so I wouldn't rely on it alone against Mannadium, but it can work. Card is a solid side deck option for sure. Ultimate Slayer, dude. A Rise Art is gone. So theoretically, you can finally play Ultimate Slayer. So kind of like Droplet, the card does become an option again. Another issue with Ultimate Slayer, though, is the fact that you need extra deck space. But if you do have extra deck space, I think the card is interesting. I think in the side deck, it can be solid, honestly. I encourage you guys to at least think about it because the card is very strong. It's just you need the extra deck for it, right? But in the right deck with the extra deck space, Rescue Ace, Flu, or whatever, I think you could play this card, and I think it would not be bad. Let's get into the heavy hitters. Talents and Thrust. Let's keep it plain and simple. These cards are bust. The thing is, there's not going to be that many hard negates, and these cards are just amazing in this type of format, right? Yeah, going first, they're not going to be as impactful sometimes, depending on how many hand traps people use. I think Talents is still going to be okay going first because people are going to be playing Ash at the very minimum. You can really punish something like a Nibiru with Thrust. You can punish Bystials. You can punish Phantasme. The very, very best thing about Thrust, actually, is the interaction with a card like Herald of the Abyss. I think having a card like Thrust, which is just a solid board breaker in general, but then also being able to basically have 4 outs to a Noir or any other unaffected monster, I think that's just alone insane. And this is going to suck for all the people on a budget. And I do feel for you guys. I think it's a big issue issue that Thrust is so expensive right now. But in order to effectively and efficiently deal with such a diverse format that we're expecting, I think Thrust is going to be crucial. It means you have extra ways to get to talents. If you don't need that, you can do whatever you want. Like, it's just such a good card, dude. It's such a good card. And talents as well. Actually, over Fenrir. Yeah, no, these two cards are definitely the best board breakers. So board breakers are in a very good spot right now, I think. I'm a big fan of a lot of those cards. Some of them only in the side deck. Actually, a lot of these only in the side deck because they usually are not that great going first. The format is looking to be quite diverse, but quite healthy in that sense, because there's like nothing in the format where it's like, oh my god, I can't deal with that, it's impossible, right? There's like very strong options against the mid-range decks, the combo decks, the stun decks, the runic decks. There's just solid ways to build your deck against pretty much everything, and I like that. I think it's going to be quite the deck building challenge leading up to YCS Dortmund, and that's always exciting. All right, let me know what you think of this tier list. I hope you liked it. Once again, if you enjoyed the content, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If I missed any board breakers that you want to know about, leave the comment down below and I'll try to answer them. Without further ado, say goodbye to YouTube, Twitch chat, and I'll see you guys next time. Best of luck to everyone playing or preparing for YCS Dortmund, and I'll see you guys there. Bye bye.